A very good morning and Jai Hind dear students. How are you all? I hope you all must be fine, doing great, revising your chapters, preparing for your half yearlies. Okay, so dear students, today we are going to start a very new chapter from the book Moments, and it is chapter number 5, The Happy Prince, written by Oscar Wilde. Before starting, I just want to tell you the introduction to the lesson, and this story is about a prince. When the prince was alive, he was very happy. After his death, a big statue of his was erected on a pedestal. Erected means constructed. Okay, pedestal is a high column, you can say, above from the ground, and there it was constructed. From there, the statue of prince could see the entire city, and at that time he saw the miseries of the people. He saw how people are living in pain, misery, poverty. He saw the poor people, the homeless, their hunger and starvation. The prince was sad to see all these miseries and sadness of the people. So, in this chapter, we will study the story of this prince. Who was this prince? How he helped the people? Okay, everything we are going to study in our story. So, let us begin. High above the city on a tall column stood the statue of the happy prince. I hope you all can see here on the screen. Yes. So, this is the statue of the prince which you can see. He was gilded all over with thin leaves of fine gold. Gilded means he was covered all over. Okay? He was covered all over with thin leaves of fine gold. For eyes, he had two bright sapphires, because this is the statue of the prince. So that is why its outer covering was of gold. His eyes had two bright sapphires, and sapphires, ruby, all these are the precious gemstones, beta. Okay, these are very expensive, very precious gemstones. So for his eyes, he had two bright sapphires, and a large red ruby glowed on his sword hilt. Hilt is the handle, you can say handle of the sword. Okay, especially the handle of the knife or dagger is also known as hilt. Okay, so the statue of a prince stood on a high platform overlooking the city. Overlooking the city means from there everybody could see the statue, and the statue can see everybody. The prince was called a happy prince. Why? Because when he was alive, he always remained very happy. Very happy. He has never experienced misery, sadness, ugliness of this world outside. Upon his death, a big statue of his was erected in the center of the city in his remembrance, so that everybody should remember this prince. The statue of this happy prince was covered with thin layers of gold, and instead of eyeballs, there were two bright shining sapphire stones. In the handle of his sword, a bright ruby stone was placed. Now see, one night there flew over the city a little swallow. His friends had gone away to Egypt 6 weeks before, but he had stayed behind. Then he decided to go to Egypt too. Swallow, a small tiny bird, a grayish color bird, brownish. I hope you all have seen that bird. Okay, so swallow is a tiny bird, you can say. Although it is not a human being, still the writer is referring to it as he and his. So writer is considering swallow as a male and is referring it as a human being, he. He says that all the friends of this swallow had flown away to Egypt 6 weeks ago. This bird did not go with them, but later it thought of going to Egypt to his friends. So it was on its way to Egypt. Who? The swallow was on its way to Egypt. All day long he flew, and at night time he arrived at the city. Where shall I put up? He said. I hope the town has made preparations. Put up means where to live for the night. Put up means here where to live for the night. So this bird kept on flying on its way to Egypt, and at night it reached the city. Which city? The city of the happy prince. It wanted to stay somewhere for the night. That swallow wanted to stay somewhere for the night. So it thinks upon where to stay at night. The bird says that hopefully the city has made some arrangements for it to stay. Obviously, the bird does not mean what it is saying. We can say that probably the bird is being humorous. थोड़ा सा फनी, थोड़ा सा ह्यूमरस हो रही थी वो बर्ड. ओके, जॉली मूड में थी. तो इसलिए उसने बोला कि शायद इस सिटी ने मेरे रुकने के लिए प्रिपरेशंस ऑलरेडी कर दिए हैं. नाउ सी, then he saw the statue on the tall column. I will put up there, he cried. It is a fine position with plenty of fresh air. So he alighted just between the feet of the happy prince. So alighted means descended, to land down. You can say here adjust also, but landing down is known as alighted. Adjusting can also be used. Now when this tiny bird saw this huge statue of the happy prince, it thought of staying there for the night. So the bird thought that it was a good place to spend the night. There was shelter and lot of fresh air also. So the bird came and alighted. It stopped and sat in between where? The feet of the statue of the happy prince. I have a golden bedroom, he said softly to himself as he looked round, and he prepared to go to sleep. But just as he was putting his head under his wing, a large drop of water fell on him. What a curious thing, he cried. There is not a single cloud in the sky. The stars are quite clear and bright, and yet it is raining. Yes. So, curious means here strange thing. So, when the bird sat in between the feet of the happy prince, it was surrounded with gold. So, it thought that it had a bedroom made of gold because it was surrounded by gold all around. As it was about to sleep, it was putting its head under the wing. Suddenly, a large drop of water fell on it. The bird was surprised because all of a sudden a drop of water fell on it. The bird thought that neither it was raining nor the rainy season was going on. The swallow could not believe this because the sky was not cloudy and stars were shining. Just then, another drop of water fell on it. What is the use of a statue if it cannot keep the rain off? He said. I must look for a good chimney pot. And he determined to fly away. The swallow thought that the statue was useless because it was not able to protect it from the rain. So he thought he should not sleep under the statue. The swallow thought that it was better if it took shelter in a chimney of a house, and thought to move away from there because the statue was not able to protect from the rain. But before he opened his wings, a third drop fell, and he looked up and saw. What did he see? Now, what happened? Before the bird flew away, when the bird decided that let me fly away from here, the third drop of water fell on him, and the bird looked up. What did he see? Let's find out. The eyes of the happy prince were filled with tears, and tears were running down his golden cheeks. His face was so beautiful in the moonlight that the little swallow was filled with pity. Who are you? He said. I am the happy prince. As soon as the bird looked up, he saw that the eyes of the happy prince statue were filled with tears. Okay, and these drops of water were the teardrops falling off the statue's golden cheeks. Golden cheeks, why? Because the outer covering of prince's body was of gilded with gold. When Swallow looked at happy prince's face, it was looking beautiful in the moonlight. The little bird's heart was filled with pity for the weeping statue. It asked the statue that who it was. The statue replied that it was the happy prince. Okay, so is it clear till here? Now let us move forward. Why are you weeping then? Asked the swallow. You have quite drenched me. Drenched means when something gets soaked in water. है ना, पूरा भीग जाते हैं जब अच्छे से, तो वो that is known as drenched. The swallow thought that the statue was of the happy prince, but it was crying. Happy prince, crying. Happy, crying. Okay, so two opposite things. The statue was of happy prince, but happy prince was crying. The bird asked the statue that why it was crying. So what it also added, bird also said that you know that you had soaked me with all your tears. Now see what response this swallow is getting from the happy prince. See. When I was alive and had a human heart, answered the statue, I did not know what tears were, for I lived in the palace where sorrow is not allowed to enter. My courtiers called me the happy prince, and happy indeed I was. So I lived, and so I died. And now that I am dead, they have set me up here so high that I can see the ugliness and all the misery of my city, and though my heart is made of lead, yet I cannot choose but weep. So misery means the sadness, okay? Now let's see what conversation they were having. The happy prince narrated his story to the swallow. And what he said? He said that when he was alive and he had a human heart. Human heart means here the heart which beats, which is alive, okay? At that time he was not aware what tears were and what sorrow was, as he lived in a palace where there was happiness all around. All the people who used to work in his court used to call him Happy Prince, because he used to be happy all the time and he had not seen sorrow at all. And he said that he lived happily and died in happiness only. When he had a human heart, he never cried. He was not aware what tears were, because he had seen happiness only and never faced any sorrow. Now when he was dead, so people of the city had put him so high in the form of a statue on a pedestal that he could see the whole city and the ugliness of the city. He could see that there were so many people living in misery, lack of food, hunger, money, homelessness. Now when the statue's heart was made of lead, lead is a metal, I told you in Zoom class also, although it did not have any feelings, because now this heart is made up of a metal. It's not that live heart, that heart which is alive, which beats just like we and you. No. So he said, although my heart is not having any feelings now because it is made up of lead, then also when I saw all the sadness, I became sad and I start weeping. Okay. Now let's see. What? Is he not solid gold? Said the swallow to himself. He was polite to make any personal remarks. When the happy prince was telling his sad story, the swallow was thinking about something else in his mind. The bird, wondered that the statue of the prince was not made of solid gold. It was surprised. The swallow thought that from outside the statue was covered with gold, but as it said that the heart was made of lead and not of gold, bird realized that it was hollow and was not made of solid gold. तो वो कैसा था statue? Hollow था अंदर से. Okay, it was not solid. It saw that the statue was very sad and was crying, so he did not make any personal remarks. It did not comment anything about the statue because it was giving the value to the statue's feelings. The bird was giving value to the statue's feeling, and he found that the statue is very sad at this moment, so that's why he did not make any personal comments. Far away, continued the statue in a low musical voice. Far away in a little street there is a poor house. One of the window is open, and through it I can see a woman sitting at a table. Her face is thin and worn, and she has a coarse red hands all pricked by the needle, for she is a seamstress. Coarse means rough, and seamstress means a woman who makes living by sewing, by stitching the clothes. Okay, so the statue continued its story. It spoke in a very musical voice that far away there was a house of a poor woman, and the window of her house was open, and it could see through the window that she was sitting near the table. Her face was thin and she was tired. Her hands were rough and had become red because they had been pricked by the needle. And the woman was a seamstress. Seamstress, a woman who makes a living by sewing. Okay. Now see, she is embroidering flowers on a satin gown for the loveliest of the queen's maids of honor to wear at the next court ball. In a bed in the corner of the room, her little boy is lying ill. He has a fever and is asking his mother to give him oranges. His mother has nothing to give him but river water. So he is crying, "Swallow, swallow, little swallow, will you not bring her the ruby out of my sword hilt? My feet are fastened to this pedestal and I cannot move." The woman, then further the statue describes that there is a woman, and that woman was embroidering flowers on a gown of the queen's maid who would walk along with the queen during the court ball. So what happens, court ball, when some function happens, a marriage or something like that in the royal court, in the royal palaces, so the maid who walk along with the queen, that is queen's maid, and that woman was embroidering flowers on that queen's maid's gown. Okay, the statue said the lady who was embroidering the gown had a little child who was not well, and he was suffering from fever, and what he is demanding? Oranges. His mother, she was very poor, she had no money, and she could only give him what? Water of the river. And that's the reason the boy was crying. So the happy prince statue requested the swallow to take out the ruby stone from the handle of its sword and give it to the lady. Statue said that its feet were fastened. Fastened means attached to the platform, and because of it, it could not move. Okay, now let us move forward. "I am waited for in Egypt," said the swallow. "My friends are flying up and down the Nile and talking to the large lotus flowers. Soon they will go to sleep." Now see, the swallow was little bit reluctant in doing all this job, and he replied that it had to go to Egypt, and his friends were waiting for him. The swallow said that his friends were in Egypt and they were flying near the Nile river and talking to the large lotus flowers which grew there. Soon they would go to sleep, and so I also want to reach Egypt at the earliest. जितना जल्दी हो चुके मुझे भी इजिप्ट जाना है. Okay. The prince asked the swallow to stay with him for one night and be his messenger. The boy is so thirsty and the mother so sad, he said. The statue is requesting now the bird to stay with him and be his messenger for only for one night and help those poor people. I don't think I like boys, answered the swallow. I want to go to Egypt. So once again swallow opposed his request and said that it did not like boys, so why should it help that boy? Moreover, I have to go to Egypt. But the happy prince looked so sad that the little swallow was sorry. It is very cold here, he said. But he agreed to stay with him for one night and be his messenger. Thank you, little swallow, said the prince. So finally the bird agreed. The happy prince was very sad, no? That's why swallow felt very sorry for him. And then swallow said that it was very cold here, but okay, it's fine. I would stay with you for one night and next morning I would fly. I would go for my work. I would go for your work. I will give that ruby. And then happy prince thanked him. The swallow picked out the great ruby from the prince's sword and flew away with it in his beak over the roofs of the town. So finally the swallow took that ruby stone from the happy prince's sword, and the bird took the ruby in its beak and flew over the town. He passed by the cathedral tower where the white marble angels were sculptured. He passed by the palace and heard the sound of dancing. As this swallow was on its way to the poor woman's house, it passed the cathedral. Cathedral, beta, it is a church, and on the church tower, white colored marble angels were sculptured, means they were created, angels. Then he reached the palace. He crossed the palace and he could hear the sound of dancing from inside the palace. A beautiful girl came out on the balcony with her lover. I hope my dress will be ready in time for the state ball, she said. I have ordered flowers to be embroidered on it, but the seamstresses are so lazy. When this swallow was crossing over the palace, then what this swallow saw, that a girl came out on the balcony along with her lover, and she was hoping that the gown, that which she had given to that seamstress for embroidering, would be ready on time. She was talking about the same gown on which that lady was doing embroidering, to whom the bird had to give the ruby stone. He passed over the river and saw the lanterns hanging on the mast of the ships. At last he came to the poor woman's house and looked in. Mast क्या होता है बच्चे? What is mast? Mast means sail of the ship. When the swallow flew over the river, ships also came along the way and lanterns were hanging on their sails. So finally the swallow reached the woman's house. The boy was tossing. Tossing का मतलब होता है, what is the meaning of the word tossing? Means turning left and right, continuously turning left and right. So the boy was tossing feverishly on his bed because he was not well, so he was not having a sound sleep and he was tossing. And the mother had fallen asleep because she was very tired. In he hoped and laid the great ruby on the table beside the woman's thimble. Thimble is a metal or plastic cap with a closed ended wand to protect your finger and push the needle in sewing. So that is called thimble. So the swallow put the ruby stone on the table near the thimble of that woman, and then he flew gently round the bed, fanning the boy's forehead with his wings. How cool I feel, said the boy. I must be getting better, and he sank into a delicious slumber. Slumber we have already done in class. Slumber means a deep sleep. Slumber means a deep sleep, and sank here means drown. Going into a deep sleep, you can say, that is known as sank. So after keeping the ruby stone on the table, the swallow went near the boy as his mother was sleeping, and no one was taking care of him. It shook its wings near him, because of which the boy could felt the cool air and felt better. The boy felt that he was getting better and went to sleep. With this, we can make out that the swallow was a kind-hearted bird. Okay. Then the swallow flew back to the happy prince and told him what he had done. It is curious, he remarked, but I feel quite warm now, although it is so cold. Now the bird felt warm. Why? It says that it was strange. It is quite curious. It is strange that it was feeling little warm, even though the weather was very cold. Now see what prince is replying. That is because you have done a good action, said the prince. So prince said that this feeling of warmth is coming to you because you had done a good deed. You had helped someone. And the little swallow began to think and then fell asleep. Thinking always made him sleepy. So after listening to Happy Prince, Swallow started thinking, and when he started thinking, he felt sleepy because whenever he thought, he used to feel sleepy. Okay, just like you, whenever you take out your books to read, you feel sleepy. When day broke, he flew down to the river and had a bath. Tonight I go to Egypt, said the swallow, and he was in high spirits at the prospect. Prospect means here thought of something, think of something, जैसे किसी चीज़ के बारे में सोचते हैं हम, उस that is known as prospect. So next morning the swallow bird went to the river and took a bath and thought that night he would reach Egypt. He was very happy. So he visited all the monuments and sat a long time on the top of the church steeple. Steeple means the high tower of the church. Okay, because he has to leave for the Egypt, so Swallow thought, let me visit all the monuments of the city today. When the moon rose, he flew back to the happy prince. Have you any commissions for Egypt? He cried. I am just starting. So when it was night and moon rose, Swallow went to Happy Prince and sought permission to leave for Egypt. Commissions means here he was actually going nearby and asking for permission that let me go. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince. Will you stay with me one night longer? I am waited for in Egypt, answered the swallow. Again, prince is requesting him, that swallow, to live with him for one more night, but the swallow replied that I have to go to Egypt because my friends are waiting for me. Swallow, swallow, little swallow, said the prince. Far away across the city, I see a young man in a garret. Garret is a small dark room at the top of the house, beta. Okay, so he is leaning over a desk covered with papers, and in the glass by his side there is a bunch of withered violets. Withered means worn out, and violet kind of a flower. So the happy prince is again telling the second task to the swallow, and he says that far away across the city I could see in a small dark room at the top of the house a young man is sitting, and he was sitting on a desk on which the papers were spread all over, and he was trying to work hard. He had a glass lying near him in which withered flowers were lying. Okay. His hair is brown and crisp, and his lips are red as a pomegranate, and he has large and dreamy eyes. Pomegranate, anar, sabko pata hona chahiye, is a fruit. Further, the happy prince gave the description of that boy. He said that his hair were brown and crisp, which mean that he had not taken bath for a long time. His lips were red like a pomegranate, and he had big dreamy eyes. That means that this boy was very ambitious and hardworking. So he is trying to finish a play for the director of the theatre, but he is too cold to write anymore. There is no fire in the grate, and hunger has made him faint. Faint means weak. Grate is a fireplace. Okay, so the prince told the swallow that this boy has to write a play. He is a playwright. The one who writes the play, that is known as playwright, and the write is WRIGHT. It's not WRITE. Okay, but he did not have any strength to write anymore because he was feeling very cold. The boy had no money, so that's why there was no fire in his fireplace, and he was very hungry also, due to which he was feeling very weak. I will wait with you one night longer, said the swallow, who really had a good heart. He asked if he should take another ruby to the young playwright. Alas, I have no ruby now, said the prince. So what happened? The swallow asked. Swallow said that Swallow understood that what Happy Prince was trying to tell him, and he knew that Happy Prince wanted to help this boy. So he agreed to stay back for one more night. And further, the swallow asked Happy Prince if he should take another ruby stone to give it to the young playwright. So he said, "No, I don't have any more ruby stones with me. My eyes are all that I have left. They are made of rare sapphires which were brought out of India 1,000 years ago." So now what he said? He said that he had his eyes which were made of precious and rare sapphire stones which had been bought thousands of years ago from India. So he ordered the swallow to pluck out one of them and take it to the playwright. He will sell it to the jeweler and buy firewood and finish his play, he said. "Dear prince," said the swallow, "I cannot do that." And he began to weep. The swallow was very sad to learn that, to listen that the Happy Prince wanted to give his eyes to that boy, and he started crying. Swallow started crying. He told Happy Prince that he could not do so. He cannot pluck his eyes. "No, I cannot." "Swallow, swallow, little swallow," said the prince, "do as I command you." So the swallow plucked out the prince's eyes and flew away to the young man's garret. It was easy enough to get in, as there was a hole in the roof. Through this he darted means pushed himself inside, that is known as darting, and came into the room. The young man had his head buried in his hands, so he did not hear the flutter of the bird's wings, and when he looked up he found the beautiful sapphire lying on the withered violets. Okay, so finally the swallow took out one sapphire out of the prince's eyes and flew to the young man's garret. There was a hole on the roof of the room, so the swallow entered the room through that hole. The boy was sitting with his head on his hands, and that's why he did not hear the flutter of the bird's wing. And when he looked up, he saw the sapphire stone lying on the dried flowers. "I am begging to be appreciated," he cried. "This is from some great admirer. Now I can finish my play," and he looked quite happy. Appreciate means, dear students, to praise someone. So when the boy saw the beautiful stone, that's sapphire, one of the eye of the prince, he felt that some admirer, someone who really loves my work, some person who praised him, had sent a gift for him. So he thought that with this he could now finish his play very nicely. So till here we have covered in this video, dear students. Till here we have covered in this part. From here we are going to cover in the coming video, in my second video. I just want you all that the story is written in a very simple language, very simple English is used. So just read it, you can understand it very nicely. You will understand the story. It's not that difficult. So read the chapter carefully, complete the story, and I'll be sending the remaining part in my next video. Till then, take very good care of yourself. Bye bye. Have a great day ahead.